We just had a brand new poll drop out of the state of New Hampshire, and most of the time I try to avoid overanalyzing these type of polls because let's be honest here, especially in 2026, just because a pollster might have a strong track record, it doesn't automatically mean they're correct. I mean, for crying out loud, we have several pollsters claiming that Arkansas is going to flip Democrat, states like Wyoming are competitive. It's absurd. But this is one of the rare times where I do believe this is a poll you should probably look at and take note of because the University of New Hampshire, they poll New Hampshire on a regular basis. It's not like they poll New Hampshire once and they call it a day. No, they poll New Hampshire basically every other month. And what they just found should be very concerning for Democrats because, according to them, John Sununu, the presumptive Republican nominee, is beating the presumptive Democrat nominee, Chris Pappas, by over 2 points. Yeah, we now have a pollster, not some random pollster, by the way. This is one of the better pollsters out of New Hampshire. For the first time this cycle, they just found John Sununu actually winning, at least in the last couple of months. That is very noteworthy. This is not some random pollster. Again, it's not like this pollster is finding Democrats winning Arkansas. No, this is a good pollster out of New Hampshire. And for the first time this cycle, they found John Sununu actually winning. You think I'm exaggerating? Look at this. John Sununu, since September 2025, has been down against Pappas by roughly 3 to 7 points the entire cycle. His best showing before this was in June of this year, where he was down by only 3 points. And you notice in June, he was starting to pick up a bit of momentum from, I believe that's April. April, he was down by 7. Chris Pappas, meanwhile, he's been imploding. Look at this. He was at 50% a couple months ago. Now, he's down all the way to 43%. And this right here is why this is actually noteworthy. We're not just talking about, oh, a 1 point shift for Pappas and that's it. He's not only going down, he's currently imploding, even against Scott Brown, who most people would argue is not a strong candidate. Even against Scott Brown, he went from cracking 52% consistently to crashing to 45%. Yeah. So even against a weaker candidate, he still wins against Scott Brown, but not by 15 points like it was for the entire cycle. This is the first month where we're beginning to notice, okay, Democrats, they might have a problem here in New Hampshire. I cannot believe I'm saying this, but there is a pathway for Republicans to actually win this race. That sounds crazy, and let's be clear, that's not my official prediction just yet. But this is not good for Dems, no matter how they try to spin it. Okay, if it was just Sununu going up and he cracked 45%, that's one thing. You could simply argue and pass that off as, well, that's just Republican voters breaking for John Sununu. That's one thing. But the difference is, it's not just Sununu going up. Chris Pappas is imploding. He's going down every single month from 50 to 49 to 47. Now he's down to 43%. He is closer to 40% than he is to 50%. That's not good, especially for what is a Harris plus 3 state and what's supposed to be this historic, record-breaking blue tsunami where Democrats gain 50 House seats, which that could still happen, I guess. But guys, this is not good. Like, no matter how they try to spin this, how can anyone say, yeah, Chris Pappas crashing and burning right now is actually a good thing? Especially when you factor in, as of now, or I should say, at least as of June 30th, Chris Pappas has spent $8.5 million on this race. Yeah, $8.5 million. Meanwhile, John Sununu has spent not even $1 million. He still has $2.5 million on hand. So Chris Pappas is burning through all of his money even before the primary. We got to talk about that in a second. That what's going on in the primary is a mess. But he has spent all this money And the more money he spends, the more time he campaigns, he keeps going down. That's the issue here. If he spent no money, he still has more money than John Sununu, at least on hand. But again, here's the problem. Republicans are going to have a lot of money from outside groups pouring into New Hampshire. That's the one advantage Republicans have. They have, we talked about this a million times now, the biggest advantage in fundraising ever. They're destroying these Democrat groups by hundreds of millions of dollars. So Chris Pappas having a small lead on hand, that's good for him. But with the amount of money he spent so far and the fact he keeps going down the polling, hate to break it to some people, but that's not good. No matter how you try to spin it, the fact he spent this much money as of now, meanwhile Sununu has spent next to nothing, these outside groups of the GOP, they have spent nothing as of now. Yeah, they're spending a little bit as of now, like I guess a tiny bit, but most of the money they're going to spend, it's after Labor Day. And the fact that Pappas is going down now, the more you look at this, the more you begin to realize, okay, this is not good. Like, this is not good. And okay, some people might try to explain this away and say, well, this could just be a single response bias and they sampled more Republicans. I could understand a 2-point shift. Like, okay, Pappas went from being up by 3 to up by 1 against Sununu. Fine. But I highly doubt him going down against even Scott Brown has everything to do with just the sample got more Republican. But even if that's the case, because that could be an explanation, maybe they just had a more Republican sample. Ashland Insights, they've been polling something nationally for this entire year. They've been polling enthusiasm for both the Republican and Democrat parties. And Democrats for this entire cycle have had a huge lead over Republicans in enthusiasm, which is why, in my opinion, they were having these ridiculous leads in Sunday polling. And yeah, that could still happen. But as of the last couple of months, Ashland Insights, they noticed something very strange happening. Republican enthusiasm has been trending upwards. Look at this. It's been trending upwards for basically the entire year. Democrats, meanwhile, especially in the last couple months, keep that in mind, it's been going down. A lot of these independents, same thing. They surged. That's noteworthy because you could argue part of the reason that some Republicans are gaining now, like Scott Brown or John Sununu, it could just be a lot of these average Republican voters that before the summer, they weren't really paying attention. They really weren't paying attention to what's happening in the New Hampshire Senate race, the Iowa Senate race, whatever. So they were undecided or they just pick a random name like Chris Pappas or whatever. But now they're beginning to pay a bit more attention. Same thing with a lot of these independents, who I guarantee you, these are right-wing independents. That could explain partially what's going on here. That could explain that a lot of these undecided voters, they're not really undecided. They're just not really paying attention. They're not being sampled right now. And Republican enthusiasm, it was so low for so long that these Democrat samples just overwhelmed everybody. And that's why you have some ridiculous garbage like, oh, Democrats are going to win Arkansas. It's just absurd. But now, in the last couple of days, last couple of months, Republican enthusiasm, it's getting close to meeting the Democrat enthusiasm. That's significant. And it's basically perfectly correlated to John Sununu's rise in New Hampshire compared to Chris Pappas's decline in New Hampshire. Obviously, that's not the only explanation. There are other reasons as well. Maybe people are just realizing, oh, a John Sununu is running and they're picking him. But still, I do think this is part of what's going on. A lot of these undecideds, a lot of these independents, they weren't really breaking away from Republicans. They were just waiting until June, July, August before they really began to pay attention, figure out what's going on here. And now the enthusiasm gap, for the first time in a long time, there's a chance come September, it actually becomes a net win for the GOP. They have more voters enthusiastic to vote than Democrats do. And if that happens, that's basically unheard of for a midterm. For the party in power to do that, that basically never happens, especially this late in the cycle. That most of the time, it's the party out of power that's extremely motivated. They're going to vote. Well, there's a chance come September that flips. Not a guaranteed thing, of course, but keep that in mind. Makes you really wonder what's going on here. But honestly, if you're the Democrat Party, your biggest worry in this poll is not even Chris Pappas crashing and burning. That's bad enough in the general. What's happening in the primary in New Hampshire? Listen, I still think Chris Pappas wins. Okay? But guys, Democrats have a huge problem. Yeah, Republicans are gaining enthusiasm. Yeah, they're gaining in the general election, at least according to the University of New Hampshire. But in the same poll, they also conducted a poll for the Democrat primary. And, well, look at this. Chris Pappas, for most of the entire primary, was at 65%, 61%, 57%. But then in June of this year, he went down to 53%. And for the first time this cycle, at least since September 25, he is below 50%. And guess who's surging? The DSA nutcase. Yeah, this is a much bigger problem for Democrats than what's happening between Chris Pappas and John Sununu. At least Chris Pappas, he still would have a good chance of winning. If they actually go ahead and somehow allow this DSA nutcase to win the primary, which I still think Pappas holds on, but the fact this nutcase has spent next to no money, you think I'm exaggerating? She has spent, as of June, $150,000 compared to $8.6 million for Pappas. Hell, she doesn't even have $50,000 on hand. She has no money, yet she's surging. The fact that there's even a chance of this even potentially being a Pappas defeat, how? How on earth is that even possible? I still think Pappas holds on, but this is more worrisome. If he doesn't even crack 50%, he's a deep shit. If he loses, you think Pappas is struggling now? You think Democrats have a problem in New Hampshire now? Imagine them picking a DSA nutcase in New Hampshire. We're not talking about some far left state. This is the state of New Hampshire. They're much more libertarian. They're not going to elect this nutcase. You really think the voters of New Hampshire are going to pick this DSA nutcase over a Sununu? I get it, it's a Senate race. He wouldn't win by 20 points or anything crazy like that. But man, if they actually allow her to win, you're a deep shit. Already you're a deep shit. But now you have the primary becoming very competitive. You have to spend all this money to barely hold on, if hold on at all. Yikes. Now, if the Republican Party is smart, they don't say a word about this. Do not say anything about this nutcase. Let her win. Because this is the problem with the GOP. They talk about these nutcases before the primary happens. Democrats realize what's going on, and they panic, and they spend a lot of money. Like in Michigan, like in Wisconsin. They spent a shitload of money in both those races. Yeah, they didn't win Michigan, but El Said nearly lost. Hell, he would have lost if it was only 2 people on the ballot. Francesca Hahn, she actually lost. Yeah, with what happened in Milwaukee is sketchy, but still, she underperformed dramatically. That's because Republicans, they made a big deal about it. They began to make a big stink about these nutcases winning these primaries. Democrats realize this and they panic. Notice the DSA candidates that have won their primaries in stunning upsets this year. Look at Florida with Nixon. Nobody talked about her, and she won by a decent margin. Oklahoma, another nutcase. Somehow she won by a big margin because Republicans didn't mention anything about them. I would assume Democrats are still going to spend regardless, but do not unleash whatever research you have on her now. Just wait. If she somehow wins a nomination, then release it. Because I think she has a lot of crap. She has a lot of issues that Democrats, they probably don't want publicly released. But we're going to see what happens. The fact that we're even talking about New Hampshire in August of this year, that worries some for Dems here. We still got to wait and see. Of course, Chris Pappas, I still think, is favor of the Democrat Party, or in the Democrat primary, excuse me. But man, you go from being up with 65% of the vote to not even cracking 50. And now you look at his favorability. Look at this. Not even 50% of voters for the Democrats have a favorable opinion of Pappas. 26% have an unfavorable opinion. His net favorability is plus 23, down from plus 20 or 32 in June and plus 45 in April. Yeah, the Democrats, hopefully they'll wake up. Hopefully Chris Pappas's team is asleep at the wheel and they somehow lose. That is the funniest outcome, but the outcome that gives Republicans the easiest pathway to win. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy, smash the like button down below, subscribe, share with your friends, and of course, join the channel today. Godspeed to all of you.